Steve Jewin, MMA Mania.
Right, go ahead, Steve. You're on.
The Jewel, Julia Budd. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. It's been a while since we've talked, and I appreciate getting the opportunity and the chance to talk to you again today with this big title fight coming up. How excited are you? It's been over a year in the making now.
Yes, it's even been more than a year. We were supposed to fight in 2015, and it never ended up happening. So it's the third time, and yeah, I'm so excited.
That's right. It has been a while now, going back to at least Boise, Idaho, when that was originally supposed to happen. How surprised when your replacement, due to injury, was able to submit the legendary Marloes Coenen?
I was in shock.
I think everybody was in shock, including Marloes.
Yeah, for sure. It was shocking. And then it's like, that's a fight game at the end of the day, and I just feel like maybe she didn't take her serious enough beforehand or whatever. I don't know what went down, but yeah, it was kind of we were all silent in the gym when we were watching it.
I think part of it was also she felt disrespected because Alexis didn't make the weight, and it seems that's been happening with a lot of her opponents recently. Both Alexis and Talita Nogueira didn't make weight for the fight with her.
Yeah, exactly.
Though I asked her about that earlier this week, and she said that, unlike some of her other opponents, Julia is a professional, so Julia will make the weight. So I'm sure you agree with that.
Oh, yeah. I'm a professional, and the title's on the line for it. So if anything, I'll be a little underweight for sure.
Right on. Now, does it add an extra dimension to this fight that not only is it for the title, but it would be your 8th win in a row? Win streaks are pretty rare in MMA.
Yeah, I don't even, I didn't even realize that I was on that win streak until Bellator put it up, and I was like, oh my God, that's awesome. But, yeah, that would, the main thing is getting the job done on Friday night and, making sure that I'm victorious that night, and that'll add to my win streak, and that's awesome.
Absolutely. Now, given how long Marloes has been in the sport, and given the fact that it's been over a year now that you've been ready for this fight, how well studied do you feel on her at this point? You got to feel like you know every trick in the book she has.
I do. I feel like I've studied her so much, and then you always got to be, keep into consideration that anything can happen factor. So it's like all my martial arts experience, I believe, will be helping me get into to make sure that I'm victorious on March 3rd. And, I've been fighting for a long time as well. Maybe not in mixed martial arts as long as her, but I've been fighting in Muay Thai and kickboxing since 2002. So I'm pretty confident going into it.
I'm glad you brought that up because there was something from your kickboxing days that I wanted to ask you about. You've actually faced the current UFC champion, Germaine Durandamy, twice. Once in kickboxing, once in MMA. Lost to her in the former, beat to her in the latter. So how do you feel now knowing that she's the UFC champion?
I feel great, but at the end of the day, it's like, everything's riding on next weekend. So it's like, okay, yeah, that's cool that I beat her and that she's the champ right now. But at the end of the day, it's like, I need to prove myself on March 3rd and show that I'm, one of the best 145ers in the world. And, everything's kind of riding on that to me. So that's kind of what I feel like right now. And then I'll celebrate even more about beating her, beating both of them then.
Right, I understand that completely, but I will say I do find it's an interesting parallel right now that both companies are crowning an inaugural featherweight champion just weeks apart, and there are so many mutual opponents that can be measured between you and Marloes and Germaine and everybody involved here. It's like you've all crossed paths at some point. Yeah,
exactly. I think it's awesome though. Like I'm excited that UFC brought in the division and crown champions, and I think the more energy and attention to the division, the better. Whether it's from Bellator, whether it's from Invicta or UFC.
Now, speaking of mutual opponents, both you and Marloes have faced Arlene Blencowe, and one of the things Marloes said to me when I interviewed her was, just look at how I fought Arlene and just look at Julia when she fought Arlene. I had the more dominant fight. What do you make of that statement?
Well, yeah, but it doesn't mean anything now, So it's like maybe that's maybe that's, I went to the decision with Arlene. I think Arlene was better when I fought her than when Marloes fought her. So at the end of the day, none of that really matters. It's what we do next weekend to one another. And I'm a different fighter than Arlene is, that's for sure.
All right. Well, talk to me a little bit about your training camp preparing for what you feel will probably be the best Marloes. You know, like you said, every fighter is different in every fight, and you got to think you're going to be facing the best Marloes that she's ever been. So what's the preparation been like for that?
The preparation's been really intense. You know, I've been getting out of all my comfort zones. So that was what this training camp was. On top of like all the mental, physical, and preparation that I put in, it's just like I feel like I've broken through any of those comfort zones that I had before, whether it was in my sparring or on the pads or running. I've broken all those barriers, and so that was kind of when we sat down and we found out what night I was going to be fighting and the training camp for this. That was what this was about. Was like just getting totally out of your comfort zone and making sure that, you know, I definitely want to finish this fight, you know, as soon as possible if I can. But I'm also super confident that I've got the cardio and the energy and everything to go 25 minutes if I have to.
Speaking of finishing, that's another thing I wanted to talk to you about, because when you were fighting in Invicta and I was going out to Kansas City for those fights, I got used to the fact that every time you were on the card, you were going to finish your opponent, because back to back to back, 3 straight fights, you were always finishing your opponents. Is it a little frustrating that recently you've been going to decision instead of getting the finish, and is that something you really want to do in a title fight to make a statement? Yeah,
definitely. You know, I want to get the finish so badly. And that's the ultimate goal here. It's like win on March 3rd, get the finish, get your hands raised, and then, you know, whatever happens afterwards happens. But it's just, I've been so, I've had a one-track mind this entire training camp, and I'm just looking forward to getting in there and doing work.
Now, is it also gratifying that this is the main event in Thackerville? Because, as I recall, the last time it was a scheduled fight for the main event of the Spike.com broadcast instead of the main televised card.
Yeah, you know, it definitely the fans and everybody kind of had something to say about that, and I think that definitely helped to make it so that we could be, you know, on the main card, but not only on the main card, it's historical because we're the first women to headline a Bellator card.
Absolutely. And I've got to think that Scott Coker is pretty happy with that as well, because he's always been a champion of women's mixed martial arts going back to Strikeforce, something you know about very well.
Yeah, he's always supported the women.
Mm-hmm. Does it feel like it now in 2017, with so many weight classes and so many promotions and so many televised arenas for women's MMA, that it no longer even has to be considered unique like it did maybe 5 or 10 years ago?
Exactly. I think we're just, now it's not, you know, it's so common. There's almost a women's card or a women's fight on every card, and it's pretty cool on Bellator 174. There's going to be 3 women's fights, and you know, I think that it's just showing that it's way more equal now.
Absolutely. And speaking of which, what do you think going forward when they have one of these signature tentpole events that they like to do? You know, they have them in San Jose and St. Louis and Houston every now and then. Would you want to be headlining one of those cards as well?
Totally. I've never had that experience. It would be amazing, and hopefully maybe they want to do one in Canada, and I'd love to be one of the headliners for that one.
Absolutely. And that was another thing I was going to ask you about, actually, was the support right now in Canada, because way back when I first started following you, the co-host of the MMA podcast I was doing is from Ottawa. I know that's on the opposite side of the country, but he was like, a Canadian's a Canadian no matter where in Canada you're from. So you got to be feeling a lot of love from all the provinces going into this title fight.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, it's MMA is huge now in Canada. Not that it wasn't before, but it's funny because before, when I'd be in the States, people would recognize me and come over and say good luck and those kind of things. And now it's happening to me all over in Vancouver. So it's cool to see that, you know, people are paying attention, and that it's definitely taken off and people are fans.
Mm-hmm. And of course, right now, everybody seems to be buzzing about the fact that GSP just signed a new contract and he's returning. So that's got to be a boost to the Canadian scene as well with him coming back.
Totally. I'm so excited for that.
Who do you think he should fight first? There seems to be a lot of different opinions on that subject.
Yeah, well, I think, what are they doing, Bisping or something?
Yeah, that's one of the rumors.
I think that'll be a good fight.
Bisping's possibility, Conor McGregor's.
I think that'll be a good fight.
Yeah, they put out Conor's name too.
That would be pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be a really cool fight as well.
All right. Well, it's going to be a pretty cool fight here coming up at Bellator 174 as well. You and Marloes Coenen, and we can't wait to see it. Thackerville, Oklahoma, can't wait to see it. So, one last thing, how do you feel about returning to Thackerville again for this fight? It could have been anywhere, but it's a venue you already know.
Yeah, exactly. I'm pumped. Can't wait to go there. I said this before, my mom was born in Oklahoma, so, I feel like it's cool. It's cool to be fighting there, and I'm glad that I had already fought there before, so I'm familiar with the venue and everything, and yeah, it'll be good to get in there and get another W.
All right. Well, that's what we'll look forward to seeing coming up here at the WinStar World Casino and Resort. And Julia, before I let you go, I want to give you this opportunity to plug anything you want, thank anybody you want, sponsors, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay. I want to thank my teammates and friends, family at Gibson MMA in Port Moody, my coaches, Lance Gibson Sr. and Lance Gibson Jr., and all my training partners. Very
good. So look out for an amazing fight coming up here, March 3rd, WinStar World Casino Resort. Title fight, main event, Julia Budd, Marloes Coenen. We can't wait to see it. Julia, thank you for the time today.
Thank you.
And Dan, thank you as well.
Thank you, Steve.
You bet. Bye-bye.